With permission, let me call this meeting to order. I'm Dana Hall, and our speaker this evening, my pleasure is to introduce a many-year friend, Andy Zepp, the founder of the Finger Lakes Land Trust, which is having an ever-increasing, very positive impact on the Finger Lakes and in our part of the world. Andy, I think you founded the Finger Lakes Land Trust toward 30 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, 31 now. Hard to believe.
Yeah, yes, time goes so fast. But without further ado, please take the microphone. And you earlier said that we can interrupt you whenever you get a breath to ask a question. So off to you, Andy.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time tonight, because I think, Dana, was I on deck for March or April? I can't remember.
Yeah, yes or yes.
Yeah, we was going to see you in person, and it'd been a while since I had visited with you all for an update, and I wanted to update you on 3 specific projects in the watershed we're working on, but then talk about what I see as 2 unmet needs that potentially we could work on together and probably with other people and institutions. But first, the good news, some of you, I think, are aware that we bought 1,300 feet of shoreline off Sam Adams Lane. We've completed the fundraising for that, just about, I think literally, we may be complete or just 1,000 or 2. We plan to dedicate that and open it to the public. Because of the bluffs there, this is not a lake access preserve, it's more of a lake view preserve. So we're gonna have, it's a beautiful overlook. We put in, we worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to create 2 kind of pond wetland detention basins that are seasonal. So they're now dry if you go out there, but they really did capture a lot of stormwater runoff and allowed it to gradually infiltrate. Where we stand now is the contractor to build the parking lot and bioswales to handle the runoff from the parking lot was delayed by COVID, hoping they'll start any day now. And then we will let you know about some form of appropriate socially distanced ribbon cutting, but it looking like September. So there's going to be professionally done interpretation on a kiosk, and then a kind of an out and back trail from Sam Adams Road that traverses fields, crosses a stream, and ends up coming out through the woods to the view over the cove there. There'll be 2 scenic overlooks there. So that's moving forward, and again, hopefully September, it'll be open to the public. As we work on, was there a question?
No, I just said that sounds great.
Yeah, we're excited, and something we might add to in the future as well. At the other end of the lake, though, our work at the Owasco Flats continues, very different type of project. We are under contract to buy 35 more acres on Rockefeller Road. It's adjacent to the Nye property we bought and conveyed to the state. This is owned by the Halls. They'll retain a little frontage on Rockefeller, but this is essentially a long rectangle of drained wetland that's been farmed over the years, but has been let go in recent years. We already have had U.S. Fish and Wildlife on site, and if all goes well, they will plug the drainage ditches and back up water and doing some potholing. So driven by wildlife habitat restoration, but also by slowing down that water also should be an incremental benefit to the health of the lake. So we should own that probably within a month, and then Fish and Wildlife hopefully will do their work in August, September, and then when the gods or demigods in Albany smile, we will get paid and sell to the state. It may be a little while. So in the meantime, when we do own properties like that, they are, we have no improvements, mind you, but they're open for things like walking and hunting and whatnot. So that's one, not a huge piece, but an important puzzle piece in the Owasco Flats that we should acquire.
They're paying the instructor, so.
Further south in the watershed, this summer, we also expect to complete a perpetual conservation easement on a property along the Owasco Inlet. It includes 1,000 feet of frontage, additional 2,000 feet on a tributary, and about 90 acres of land. And just so folks know the way these conservation easements work, we hire a surveyor to actually create land use zones. So this particular property has some active agriculture, some upland woods, and then it has floodplain next to the inlet. So we have 3 management zones. One is for agriculture, that is most liberal. Upland woods can be timbered, but only subject to a management plan that we've approved and under the oversight of a forester. And then we actually survey the buffers on the environmental protection zone along the inlet and the creek. So this is should be done hopefully by the fall, and looking to do a lot more of that work because it leaves the land on the tax rolls in private ownership, and also minimizes our stewardship role as an organization where we have to monitor that easement, but a very different proposition than inviting the public onto the site at the Owasco Bluffs. So before moving on into some unmet needs, just want to see if anyone has any questions on those 3 very active projects that hopefully will cross the finish line within the next 2 or 3 months on each of them.
Very good news, Andy. That's super.
Heard anything about the funding, I don't think anybody knows about the funding. Do they from the state?
Well, I think there will be a grant round for all the state grant rounds. I think it'll be reduced and delayed, and no one knows anything, including the governor, till we determine what, if any, federal bailout package there will be. I think it will be reduced and delayed, but I think there will be some level of funding available down the road. But I think it's just anybody's guess right now.
All this seems very exciting. It really does, Andy. Your crew has done a great job.
Well,
Yes.
thanks, Jim. Next up for us, just so you know, over the hill, we're partnering with Onondaga County and the state to buy a little over 2,000 feet of shoreline on Otisco. We this week closed on 75 acres overlooking Skinny Atlas that connects 2 of our preserves. So on the east side of Skinny Atlas, we now own an uninterrupted corridor of 2.25 miles of woods overlooking the lake. We're very excited about that. And on Cayuga, we're under contract to buy a parcel in North Lansing with 4,300 feet of shoreline. So we've really been pleased with some of our shoreline successes. And it brings me back to Owasco, though. There are 2 properties, one in particular that have kind of eluded us thus far and stretch our capabilities. And I should mention, we're coordinating all of our activities with the Nature Conservancy. So we're very careful not to duplicate effort. But I don't know if any of you know, there's been for sale on the west side of the lake, a kind of an odd shaped property of 39 acres with 250 feet of shoreline. It's kind of, there's a pretty good chunk, about 4 different properties have about 3,000 feet of almost undeveloped shoreline. It's north of that one Mennonite dairy farm that's on the hill close to the lake, just north of there. Anyway, this is one of those properties. It's unusual because I haven't walked on it from above. I'm sure it's challenging development, but it's right in the middle. I think it's listed for about 260,000. 2 issues about a property like this. First is paying for it, but the big question is, if it was to be in conservation, who's going to own and manage that and handle that? So that's a separate question. One thing is that we're very aware of our limits operating in 12 counties, and we simply can't own and invite the public on everything. But I want to flag that because that property is adjacent to other undeveloped land that if someone aggregated, you might see some significant not lots of units, but in a fragile bluff area, some development that probably is not the best thing for the lake and one of the last undeveloped stretches. So that's one, frankly, we don't have an answer, but we would love to talk to other public and private sector partners to ensure that one of the last minimally developed areas of the lake. Similarly, we've had our eye on another property and talked to folks at the Conservancy and elsewhere. Just south of the village of Moravia, there's a farm across from the trailer park that's been intermittently on the market probably the last 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
It is significant that it has frontage on both banks of the inlet, considerable amount. And also, I've never looked at the zoning, but I'm sure it's got frontage on Route 38 that's tight to the creek. That is probably, you could build a lot of things that wouldn't be good for the creek. It's about 160 acres. Issue there is, I'm pretty confident it's overpriced. So it may not be an issue about moving quickly, but that's another property. It's really the head of the Owasco Flats in a way, and has restoration potential. Not suggesting that the land trust is going to move forward and acquire and own it, but I just wanted to flag these as properties that are probably pretty important to the health of the watershed. And we would be interested in working with you to talk to folks at the county, the Watershed Council, the city of Auburn, to say, we should try to figure these out, because if we don't, it'll just be more incremental development and impacts that'll add to the stresses on the lake. So I just wanted to bring those two to your attention and to say, if there's interest in engaging other partners, including the state, and figuring out how do we address these conservation needs, we would be delighted to do that. Lastly, I just want to mention this is kind of traditional work for the land trust, these real estate projects, but we are now moving forward in Skaneateles, which is our first runoff mitigation project. We're still in the design stages, but we see the need, as you do, to hold back stormwater and filter out more phosphorus. So on property we acquired on the east side of Skaneateles, we're hoping to partner with the town of Spafford and the county to essentially design a detention basin that will significantly stormwater and deal with both agricultural and road ditch runoff. I expect it's going to take a while to actually have this built. One of the big challenges, we do not have in-house engineering capability and have had a sobering lesson in what it costs. But we are moving forward on these, just particularly on pilot projects, where Finger Lakes Land Trust is not going to do all the mitigation that is needed in all our lakes. But should you identify projects that either don't fit with just soil and water or need an additional partner, soil, water, this is something we're really trying to do what we can to get good projects out there that people can see and start to see how they fit into the landscape, that they don't create big liabilities, that people keep farming and people keep driving on the roads, and yet we can particularly address those stormwater flows. So that's a bit about what's going on, and I really just wanted to bring you all up to date, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of those projects or anything else. Lastly, I do want to mention, we as an organization recognize that one of the tools we use, conservation easements, are very hard to understand, and we have like a black hole of educational need. So if there are ever opportunities to get landowners together, we will send staff or volunteers just to, doesn't have to be a huge group, but just to share information on what those things are and what they're not. Because frequently people think they provide public access, which they typically don't. People think they're forever wild, which none of ours are. And there's just a lot of education that needs to happen. So with that, I'm just happy to answer any questions.
Andy, I'll lead off on the topic of conservation easements. So are there tax advantages to the property owners? What would be the motivation on the part of one or several property owners to put some part of their land into a conservation easement?
Well, there are two things I want to mention. Just 2 years ago, we worked with a lot of other folks to get the state to create this source water protection program. So for the first time, and this is what the Nature Conservancy's grant in Owasco is, and we've got 4 or 5 other grants. For the first time, we can compete for state funding to buy conservation easements on lands that are important to the watershed. Prior to this, the only funds available were for protecting prime farmland through the Agricultural Protection Program. So for the first time, we have money to bring to the table, but it doesn't near match the need that's out there. There are 2 tax incentives that are attractive to people. If you think of around the watershed, there might be someone who is, say, the middle of the lake, say Sam Adams Lane, where they live on 70, 80 acres, has some environmental significance, has a nice house. There's subdivision potential, but frankly, it's not transformative to that person. And after they live there 30 years, they start to think, boy, I hope the next person doesn't really screw this property up. And we find landowners who care about their property, and they're giving up some economic value. But again, it's a case where if it's a nice house, it's just as likely the new buyer will do the same thing and not subdivide it. But in those cases, there are 2 incentives. One is the federal government offers an incentive based on an appraiser saying, here's what the land is worth unrestricted with subdivision potential, and here's what it's worth with the restrictions. Now, if you're at the edge of Auburn, at the edge of water and sewer, that might be worth a lot. If you're in the hills of Moravia, it might be worth very little. The other tax benefit, though, doesn't depend on the value. It's quite simply the state of New York offers the owners of land subject to donated easements reimbursement of 25% of their school, county, and town taxes up to $5,000 a year. Important thing, though, is it's the taxes on the land, not the building. So you have to look at the tax bill. But that's an annual thing that's quite simple. And you just pay your taxes, clip the receipts at tax time, and you either get a credit off your income taxes or a check from the state.
Thanks, Andy.
So Andy, the parcel that's on Westlake Road that you alluded to, that's just north of the Mennonite farm, is that, do you know the owner's name? Or you can't share it, or?
No, I don't. I'd be happy to share it because it's publicly for sale. I don't remember the name, but it's just north of the guy, Bob Durin, who lives right on the old rail grade. He has a house with a long driveway that is the rail grade, and he's to the south, and the Letchworth family is just to the north.
Oh, so it's in between there.
It's kind of in between because there's north of that Bob's house, which is about probably a 100 cottage. He's the only house around there, and then there are a couple parcels that all together comprise a pretty significant chunk of undeveloped shoreline, but the ownership is broken up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, Rick Nelson, this is great news about all your work as usual, but these projects in Wasco or the inlet and or others that have been completed or soon will be, were they in your newsletter or will they be to look up?
Yeah, they'll all be, we always do it after the fact because in real estate and the land trust, the one way to jinx property to mention it public in the newsletter, then crazy Aunt Betty will have a claim on the land and it'll never close. So,
Okay.
so our publicity is always after the fact.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
Any other questions, folks, based on what Andy has presented so far?
Oh, great work, Andy, as always. Good for you.
So Andy, you mentioned,
Andy, how closely tied are you with Nature Conservancy?
well,
Didn't hear you.
they have,
Both know which each are doing?
I think Jim, you're asking the degree to which we're coordinating with the Conservancy. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
it's
they with you.
in Owasco, the only lake for which they have a grant is Owasco. So they're not doing a lot on other lakes. And it's been very collegial at the staff level where they have the grant and we just make sure that we're not, tripping over each other, talking to landowners. And I can tell you those two properties that I flagged, I immediately brought them to the Conservancy's attention, but it didn't meet their criteria that they were looking for. So there are some other parcels on tributaries they're working on, but it's pretty easy to coordinate, and it's been going well.
Thank you.
Andy, is there a map that shows the Owasco Flats area and the inlet and so forth on which these properties are delineated? I'm trying to remember and imagine where each is relative to the others.
Yeah, and Dana, I'll send an updated map to you and you can share with everybody.
Okay.
Because again, the Conservancy acquired a parcel on the west side of the flats from the Parmalee family as a gift.
Yes.
So Jim, I don't know if you're aware of that, but the Parmalee family did donate the 80 or 90 acres of cropland on Route 38.
Yes, and
So-
very much aware of it.
Yeah,
After
so-
a lot of work that Iowa and you and a lot of other people were doing.
So that's great news, and I'll send the map that shows all these different parcels.
Oh, thanks, Andy. And Jim, as I recall, we've had numerous conversations about the land in Moravia near the trailer park. It would be on the market, then off the market, and overpriced, we thought also.
Yes, that is true, Dana. We have looked at that piece. We've talked about it a number of times in terms of its value to be acquired.
Andy, you mentioned working together to ask the city of Auburn and the Management Council and other organizations for help, for financial help. We would very much like to do that. Are there meetings being set up, or can you include us in such invites, and how could we be proactively part of the engagement?
Well, I think it's on my long-term to-do list and I will clearly reach out to you for a kind of an intimate meeting, because the one thing I want to make sure is that a public official doesn't feel bushwhacked and you can have an honest discussion. So I'm thinking, one or two from each organization and recognizing it could be a fruitless meeting, but to go right up with very specific examples of undeveloped land in the watershed on the market with an understanding of what local code would allow in terms of development. And to say, hey, we have a lake that's stressed. This is not huge money. Like for example, the 40 acres of 250 feet of lakefront, I think it's 260. Any town buys a truck for 260.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always saying, oh, we don't have any money, we don't have any money. And it's true, the budgets are strapped, but it also depends what your priorities are. And so 260,000 in the state of New York, even in a stress time, that money is out there. So it's kind of, in a nice way, holding their feet to the fire and saying, that maybe it isn't the city or the county, but it's the influence of the city and the county of getting the state to work differently, for example. But these are not huge sums of money. They are to Aula and the land trust, but you look at the economic value of the lake alone, plus the drinking water supply, and what they're making things like New York City do for their watershed. It's achievable, not easy, but achievable. So it's that kind of meeting, and I'll plan on following up with you, Dana, because it's something I think we have to just keep nudging nicely, but not giving up.
Okay, good, Andy. Everybody, don't let me dominate the conversation, but I want to, at some point here, ask about awareness. Andy HWA problems in the various growths of hemlock. But maybe before we go there, anyone want to pursue any other aspects?
No.
So Andy, I think behind the 8 ball, or I hope not too late, but at the moment in the Owasco watershed, we don't even have an inventory of where the stands of hemlock trees are. So we are just early on the path of using Google Earth. This may sound primitive, but using Google Earth during the non-foliage part of the times of the year to see where the groves of conifers are, and we're making the assumption that many of the green trees in the ravines leading down to the lake probably are hemlocks. We're becoming increasingly worried that this hemlock woolly adelgid is ahead of us and killing the hemlocks, and if we lose the trees, probably not an exaggeration, we'll lose the lake. So so let me ask this, in your organization, you must have people who are worrying about this problem and maybe are experts in helping find it and so forth also?
Yeah, and we've worked closely. Cornell has a hemlock research program. So first, just by background, there are this started years ago, and it's actually been in Eastern North America for quite some time. So you can go, I think downstate, they've probably had woolly adelgid for 30 years or more. But in our case, we first raised the question, what should we do and will it make a difference? And unlike ash trees that are dying from emerald ash borer, there really is not a good effective treatment. Like if you use the same pesticides, if you're comfortable doing that with hemlock, you use it on ash. Because of the biochemistry, ash treatment lasts 1 year, hemlock treatment lasts 6 or 7 years. So from a purely economic standpoint, there's a big difference. Cornell is experimenting with biocontrol. So on one hand, they've researched little tiny bugs from the Pacific Northwest that seem to predate these almost microscopic woolly adelgids. And the question is, will they survive and thrive in our winters? So they've been approved by the US Department of Agriculture releases. We've made available our preserves to release some of these bugs. The jury's still out, but there seems to be some potential for biocontrol. Given that, we have spent money on and are comfortable after evaluating the pesticide treatment that it's not 100% benign, but it's very localized. It's a direct treatment on the tree itself. It's not a broadcast spray. So we're comfortable with kind of the risk involved. But what we're doing is knowing that all the trees could be dead before you get the biological control. We are treating throughout our preserve system what I call refuge stands. So it's 50 to 100 trees, say. So the genetic diversity of our current hemlock population will still exist if the biocontrol works. And that's very different than looking at the watershed, the scale of what you would probably like to do for watershed protection. But we've been doing this for years now. And I can tell you, I lived next to the old city cemetery and they just did the second treatment. So they treated it 6, 7 years ago. And you could see the bugs were there. Year 6 and 7, they came in and treated them. So it's a long-term process. The real hope is though that, and this is the same for the ash, that one of the reasons not to cut down every ash tree or hemlock is nature, usually somewhere there's resistant strains within the population. And I've been told that there are apparently resistant hemlocks in New Jersey. Now, the issue for us though is we'll never live to see the resistant hemlocks repopulate our part of the world. It's a very long-term process, but that is, something that people are looking at and to be considered is to kind of make sure that we don't preclude kind of natural defensive systems as well.
So naively, we are thinking that we would do our best to identify where at least the majority of stands are in the watershed. And then work with the hemlock hunters from Cornell, as you said, to get their evaluation, and shortly thereafter start pouring as many thousands of dollars as we can raise from the state or from foundations and so forth, entering into this every 6 or 7 years treatment kind of activity with pesticide. And you're right, that'll be expensive, and I don't know. So might we be smarter to try to preserve refugee stands, as you said?
I would, a couple things. One is the state doesn't have an invasives control program, grant program.
Yeah, and
So
in
there
fact,
is
an opportunity like that, Andy, just closed. And because we didn't have an inventory to know where our problems are, we didn't think we could assemble a viable proposal. But I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, well, there is that opportunity. The one thing I would look at, if any of you go down, have ever been to Ithaca's Hangar Theater or Cass Park over on the lake? That was one of the first areas in our neck of the woods to get a Delgid, and most of the hemlock there is dead. I mean, there's in severe decline. I understand the watershed concern, but honestly, in places like that, the growth of invasive Chinese tree of heaven, ailanthus, autumn olive, as the tree dies, I've seen, and again, I've not studied this in a part of a study, but I've seen robust response of things I wouldn't want in my woods, but they do have roots and they do stabilize the soil. And I also worked in Connecticut in conservation in the late 80s when a Delgid was going through there. And frankly, I am not so sure in some situations where there aren't severe slopes, so maybe it makes sense to focus on the steepest slopes, because I've seen hemlock roots don't dissolve, they stay in the soil a while. So you do have increased intensity of rainfall without the canopy. But what I've seen is this dramatic response. But like most of our woods with invasive species, the problem is a lot of the stuff that grows back is these non-native weeds, but they do hold the soil. So one thing to consider is just start with focus on slopes, because you do have areas, hemlocks on different slopes. And if you start on the steepest, those would likely be the most vulnerable from a watershed perspective. But if you ever are down at the Hangar Theater in Cass Park in Ithaca and just look across the road, you can see kind of what's coming and the context with other vegetation.
Okay, thanks for all that advice and insight, Andy.
Andy, I was wondering, and again, I'm not up to speed with this, but do you need to hire registered applicator to put on the chemicals, or are groups using volunteers who are trained? How is that being processed?
You do need a licensed applicator. In our case, we had one of our staff go through a fairly lengthy program with the state. So the alternative was you do have to factor in that cost of hiring an applicator. Mm-hmm. That's a good point, because that is not insignificant.
Yeah, it is. And it seems like this is the only way we're going to control it, by using chemicals and sprays, as you say, every 6-7 years. And Dana's right, we have not done an inventory. We have really no idea. And I think this coming winter, there'll be more of our hemlock hunters out there looking, we'll measure off acreage and be out there looking and just assessing what the damage is already.
Yeah.
And again, the hope is that may not be as bleak as we think, that if the biocontrol doesn't work, it may be that in 10, 20 years, we've identified the resistant, say, New Jersey hemlock, and we're all planting progeny so that as the older ones decline, we have the same genetic Eastern hemlock that's descended from these resistant tree. And over time, we just have this replacement going on. So we do a lot of tree planting.
It's so nice to know this has gone on for, like, as you said, well, not nice, but that the effectiveness of 30 years of research hopefully our group can then identify those hemlock resistant species of plants, but to get something out there, maybe using grant resources in the future to plant something to replace what's dying.
Yep.
Okay, the microphones or the floor or whatever is open. Anyone want to take advantage of Andy's presence?
No, just say thank you, though. It's very interesting.
Great. Well, we look forward to working more closely with you. So don't hesitate to call us at any time.
Thank you, Andy, for your time. Thanks for sending in advance for sending the map of the Wasco Flats properties. And we'll look forward to hearing from you as to how we can be represented at these upcoming meetings with the appropriate officials.
Great. Dana, I'll give you a call to follow up on that.
Good. Thanks again, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. It was
Thank
great.
Thanks.
Okay, everyone else, let's see. I think we have a few guests. Is it useful, guests, for a few of us to take some time and give you a few highlights of aula activities? I'm asking those of you who are not in our normal meetings. So I'll be quiet. Yes, no, maybe?
I've been following the meetings all along and it's been fine, so.
Okay, so.
Owner of Tom Sons. Thank you so very much. Oh, you're more than welcome, daughter. Thank you.
Dia, am I saying your name right? I see your picture, but.
Hi. So I just recently joined and I'm just kind of, so closure, I have been on the city council for the city of Auburn. I'm recently off and I'm running for New York State Assembly, but I've been a contributing member in a couple of senses. I've been to the Bob Brower Symposium a few years, and every time I go, I become a member. So this summer I got invited to these meetings. So
good.
Coming. So I am an assembly candidate, but the 126th Assembly District has 4 Finger Lakes in it, and I need to know about these things, and that's why I'm here. I'm on a listening tour, and I have some time because of COVID. So, and it's easy to do. So I hope you don't mind. I'm just listening and learning as others. So.
No. We very much welcome your presence. Thanks for your time. We certainly don't mind.
Thank you.
Great, Dia.
Rick, why don't you give us a recent snapshot, please, of the ditches, the roadway ditches remediation project where we're partnering with the County Soil and Water Conservation District, and to the extent you know what their plans are for the remainder of this good weather season.
Okay. Dave, can you put up those pictures?
We can only hope. Hang on a sec. I got to share my screen and see what I can do here. Hang on.
And Dia, I'll address this comment to you. We've been told by scientists at Cornell that some 20% of the sediment and nutrients and of course roadway salt that make their way into a lake come from the ditches along the roadways. And as you or we drive around, you often will see ditches that are eroding. The bottom is steep or the bank, the sides are steep. So what Rick is about to tell you is the second year of a campaign to ruggedize a number of the worst cases in our watershed.
So Dana, because I've been on the city council for the city of Auburn, I am not unfamiliar with the projects that go on here because because of the Owasco Lake, the rules and regulations have been rewritten, and the reorganization of the management council itself. Also because of the issues that came up as a result of microcisterns being in the finished drinking water for the city of Auburn. So,
Yes.
so I'm not really a newbie to all of these things. I've been part of the discussion as a city of Auburn official. So I do I do know what you're talking about. So I just want you to know that. About the work that's been done with the ditches. I know that the work with the different municipalities that is going on with the management council and that sort of thing. So yeah, so I know ditches aren't thrilling to most people, but I like listening to how we're going to clean up these ditches. And I think my husband's sick of listening to me talk about the ditches as we drive by too.
Well, Dia, should we continue, or you're close enough to the action that we would probably be just telling you what you already know?
No, there's always to know what's current and to know also what's happening right now. I'm always want to hear it. Absolutely.
So Rick, continue just for a few minutes, if you would, please.
Can everybody see the map screen?
Yes.
Yes. Just an overview, the Cayuga County Soil and Water Conservation District is the contractor who do these ditch stabilizations. They receive a grant and it pays for 75%, but they need some sort of private, non-state funding, a match, and we provide that match to the donations we acquired last year into our ditch remediation fund. So this year's projects, there were 2 on Wyckoff, and that did about 1,400 feet of stabilization, and that project total was $30,000. Our portion was $7,500. And we have pictures of the Wyckoff number 2, for an example. Dave wants, I think, advance it to the next. Okay, well, they're showing, that's where Wyckoff number 2 is. That's a very, you look in the middle there, that's a stream going across there. That's a pretty deep ravine to the east, to the right. And so they line that roadside ditch to the east of that road going into.
Rick, that's actually the headwaters of the tributary that flows on Fire Lane 26.
Yes, and it flows off some serious, gets some serious runoff from the agricultural land up there just to the west. But
and Ken Kudlin, since this is right above your home, is that ravine, the trees that we're looking down on in this picture, are those hemlocks? Do you know what kind of trees they are, just by a good coincidence?
No, I think they're hardwoods, Dana, but I'm not sure. I haven't gone down in there deep to see what they are.
Okay.
Predominantly maple.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks, Ken Post. Back to you, Rick.
Advance the screen, Dave. Thank you. Okay, that's a couple more. We don't have a picture of that, but that's farther south on Wyckoff for the total of 1,400 feet of ditch stabilization. All these projects were identified by Drew Snell in the Owasco inspection program when they did a ditch survey a few years ago of the several miles of really of ditches that really need some help that we're scouring and providing a lot of sediment runoff into the lake. So,
and Rick, when you say stabilization, you mean lining with rock. Is that correct?
Yes, the pictures you'll see is mostly lined with rock. They put down a black fabric and then rock over it so the rock does not sink into the bottom of the ditch and provide stabilization. The water can go through that fabric, but it doesn't. It keeps that rock suspended to do its work. Okay, well, this is Tucker Hill Road. This is that's before and after. That's the before of Tucker Hill. It's a gravel road going up west of Route 38, south of Locke. And you can see how much lining they did. It goes up up around that bend. And then that's looking up the hill, and that's about 550 feet for $12,000. We paid $3,100. Again, by us contributing this, our 25%, we're providing, well, the total bill for just these projects is over $86,000. And if, without our contributions, it may not have been accomplished. Another one on Wyckoff Road, that's the first one. Okay, that's the ditch I was talking, the first ditch, Wyckoff number 2. And this is what it looks like before. And then that's to the south, I believe, coming down. But anyway, you can get the idea. This is all, there's no hydro seeding here. It's all rock stabilization to control the scouring, the runoff in the ditch there. And this is to the other direction and before, and should be an after coming up. So it's quite a bit. And that was, again, I don't know what the breakoff is, but how much, that's one of 3 projects on Wyckoff. But that's the one that we talked about, Fire Lane 26 headwaters. Okay, Dave, anything next? I would say that's a ditch scraping, and we're gonna probably, the next picture show the hydro seeding afterwards, or the rock. I'm not sure which location this was. That might still be the Wyckoff, but I don't know. But anyway, you get the idea. They didn't hydro seed, they lined it with rock to stabilize it. And so for a lengthy period. But the rock's expensive, and this is probably the southern portion of Wyckoff, if I was to guess. No, this is looking at it, that's the first one. But anyway, you get the idea. Lengthy, multiple hundreds of feet of lots of rock put in and lined with black fabric too. We just have so many more. And this is the one. Mathers Road intersects down by a cascade on Road 38 and goes straight uphill almost to the west. And this is the upper section of it. And this is before. Go ahead, Dave. And this is the after. And on the left, you see they carved back a big hillside and hydro seeded it, and it's growing in. So they not only did the ditch, but they carved the hillside back to minimize runoff and planted something there to control the erosion into that ditch. And that's just looking uphill, and then probably the next slide will show looking downhill. This is that hillside before it got scraped and hydro seeded to the right, and this ditch goes down to a big culvert uphill there. So that's pretty nice, huh? Compared to what was there.
Mm-hmm.
That Mathers Road project was $24,000, almost $25,000. We spent $6,200 for this particular project. And there's been a lot of work done on Mathers Road. Just downhill from this is a huge culvert they put in about 4 or 5 years ago that blew out the whole road. Must be a 6-foot diameter culvert, and all the work on each side of it to control the erosion, stabilize the road, and it's still in great shape and working fine. And then the last portion downhill before it intersects 38, they put in some, lack of a better term, like curved gutter drains, catch basins that are working to minimize the erosion on the downhill side of that part of the road on the bank. So it collects the water and shunts it down to the bottom of the hill. So we weren't involved with those 2 projects, but that's the kind of work that Soil and Water Conservation District does. So I think that's probably it, unless there's. So that's it. I haven't heard that they did many other miles. Let me put this, the hydro seeding, they did 14 loads to some obviously on this hillside, but at many other locations where towns in the county have scraped the ditch and they've hydro seeded them. Or they found a bad ditch that the best option was just to hydro seed, and it's much cheaper than obviously lining it with rock. They're scattered all over the watershed. So, and they're continuing.
And Rick, one question for me. I probably should know this already, but how many dollars left in our account to help fund this kind of work?
We spent about $8,000 or $9,000 currently. And that's, in the last communication, they said, yes, we'll be able to spend that and more if you have it. So we'll have to, that's what we committed, about $30,000 to them this year from that fund. We spent some of that money last year on other projects, but that's what we committed so far. And they did all this spring, probably under COVID conditions, April and May. You know, this has been done for a little while. So the summer's kind of their slow time, I think, in doing these things. But I don't know where they are currently working.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I guess let me ask any questions about our dishes program, board members or guests.
So what are the total miles now that have been addressed? Back in the fall at the March and symposium, I think it was around 8 miles. Is it still around that?
No, well, that was before each load of hydro seeding, if that's just the mileage, if you're talking about, does about a quarter mile. So they added about, 4 miles, I would guess, of hydro seeding. Now, the mileage on these ditches it's only about 2,400 miles of these rock line ditches, which is what, half roughly. But these are the most egregious and serious ditch needing work, where the hydro seeding goes much farther, and so it's probably up over 10, 12 miles that we've done over the last couple of years of hydro seeding only.
Wow.
And counting.
It's fabulous.
Okay, I don't want to drag out this evening meeting. Are there any other topics? Anybody have any questions?
Dana?
Might have an answer.
Dana, Bill Phillips.
Hi, Bill. Yeah, what about our HAB surveillance? So go ahead, Bill.
We're going to be kicking off our surveillance on June 13th and 14th. This year, we're going to be working Mondays and Tuesdays. My partner in crime in this is on Bucks Point. Her name is Lisa Heaton. She's kind of new to the lake, but she's very enthusiastic about what's going on. And we're in place to go. I had a call into Tony Prestigiacomo today at DEC. He hasn't returned my call, but I want to make sure that he and I are on the same page, and we're set and ready. So July 13th and 14th are our kickoff dates, and we'll be doing that every Monday and Tuesday from here to whatever the date is that they call it, and it's usually around the end of October, I think. Yeah.
Very good, Bill. Now, last report you gave us, there were several stretches around the lake that needed an observer for various reasons.
Picked up one from one of our very nice board members, and I'm still looking for people in that Indian Cove area, which is very important to us. You know, it's got 2 zones that Jeff Trescott used to cover all the time, and I'd really like to find a couple people in that Indian Cove area. And I don't know anybody down there myself. You know, if any of you do, spread the word, and Lisa or I will get down to talk with him.
Bill, pardon. Bill, I took on Zone 13. If I'm already down there and I'm already traveling to go there, so if you need somebody just around the corner,
it's not.
Let me know, because
you got to go into Moravia and up.
I know. God's country, right? But if you can't find anybody, let me know, because I'm already traveling a ways to get down to Zone 13. But then I spoke to drifters. I said, "Can I go off your dock?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Will you open up on a Tuesday or a Thursday? I mean, a Monday or a Tuesday?" And they said, "We just might open up for you." So I'm going down there for a beverage and a meal, and I'll do my observation. I'll go right around the corner to Indian Cove, but just let me know if you don't get anybody. I'm not that far from that area if I'm already traveling down there.
All right, but Indian Cove, you can get lost down in there, with all those zigzaggy roads. If anybody's been down
And I don't know anybody down there, but let me know.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have, Dana, and we're going to get started 13th and 14th.
Bill, one quick other point that I noticed is that there is a way for the general public to actually make reports.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little more?
Well, there's I don't really remember off the top of my head the website, but it's I think it's on.newyork.gov/HAB forms, and ours that we do with the people who have been trained is ProHab forms or HAB Pro forms. So if there's a little difference in the connotation of where they report, the general public does, but that's a good idea. Maybe the next time we have something in the paper that we could throw that out and say to them, this is, if you are on the lake or live on the lake and you see one of these things that you consider to be a harmful algae bloom, you can report it here, and I'll do something along those lines. Yeah.
I think that information might be available on the DEC website. If all else fails, you can go to the DEC HABs.
I think it is.
And find that.
Yeah.
Can we also have? I'm sorry. Can we also maybe have put a little blurb on Facebook about this? Have Christina put something?
I'm not a Facebook guy. Otherwise, I do it. But
no, and Christina maybe could do it, Jim. I mean, she could maybe put something or the link to this so that if they look at our Facebook page.
Christina, if you want to call me or email me, I'll give you the exact site of where the general public can participate.
Not sure Christina's still on.
Yeah, I don't think she's on anymore, but we can get her the information.
Right.
Bill, I'll make sure Christina gets that to you or gets in touch with you.
I can't hear you, Jim.
I'll make sure Christina gets in touch with you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Dana, I'm going to leave you. I pulled a hamstring the other day, and it is absolutely killing me. I can't sit down. I can't stand up. I can't do anything. I'm going to go down on ice.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for your input and for attending.
Wow.
Yes, you could. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Alrighty.
Bill. Be well.
Yep. Bye.
Night, Bill.
Okay. Any other topics, anybody? If not, then I don't know that this is a formal meeting needing a motion to adjourn, but if not, then thanks for your attendance. The first.
Make a motion the meeting be adjourned.
Oh, there we go. Okay, good.
Good job.
The first Wednesday in August is August 5th. So that would be our next of these public forums, August 5th.
I do have a question. Tomorrow morning is the monthly WQMA meeting. Is there something you or anybody want me to bring up or to report to them about AULA that ask about from?
Yeah, Rick, ask what they and their respective watersheds are doing about the hemlock woolly adelgid, or I don't want us to overreact, but right now I think we've been underreacting, and I'm trying to judge what others are doing as well.
To piggyback on that, Dana, do they have any licensed applicators within that group that, I know we're going to find it, and we need to look at how in the future to apply any chemicals, and if they already have a licensed applicator, that might help us. If we don't, we might have to train somebody.
Yes, good point, Ed.
Okay. Well,
anything else for Rick to bring up tomorrow morning, folks?
Could you ask the other the lake organizations if they have any information about their lake levels. Are they high, low? What is happening with their lake level?
Okay, lake level questions.
Thank you.
Okay, having heard a motion to adjourn and not hearing anybody arguing strongly that we don't, we'll call this meeting closed. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you,
Yes,
Jay, for
bye.
sitting
Good night.
in.
Stay well. Enjoy the 4th.
Yes, and don't get too